Hello and welcome to What is Workforce Development? We wanted everybody to know where we really came from, and since this is an online class, it only fit that we kind of tried to draw a map. First we have Mel, and she came from Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada. Next, me, Whitney Adler, and I live in Woodstock, Minnesota. Followed by Lauren Smoot, and she lives in Bakersfield, California. And last but not least, Ashley Thornton, who lives in Waco, Texas. The concept of workforce development has evolved through the years, and there are many definitions. We like this definition proposed by Lynn Harrelson of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. Workforce development is a wide range of activities, policies, and programs employed by geographies to create, sustain, and retain a viable workforce that can support current and future business and industry. As we began looking at why workforce development was needed, it became necessary for us to look at how our states have been affected by unemployment. As you can see from the table listed in the presentation, all of our states and provinces have had decreases in unemployment in the past year. This could be due to an improvement in the workforce development. In addition to information about our states and provinces, here are a few additional stats to keep in mind. The 3 states had unemployment rates of 10.0% or more in 2012. Nevada again had the highest unemployment rate at 11.1%, followed by California at 10.5% and Rhode Island at 10.4%. North Dakota had the lowest jobless rate among the states for the 4th year in a row at just 3.1%, followed by Nebraska at 3.9% and South Dakota at 4.4%. Overall, 27 states had unemployment rates that were significantly lower than the United States rate of 8.1%, while 13 states and the District of Columbia had rates significantly above it. In this presentation, we will discuss workforce development from 3 perspectives: the individual perspective, the employer's perspective, and the community perspective. We will give examples of the kinds of workforce development activities that result from each of the 3 perspectives. First, workforce development from the individual's perspective.
From the individual's perspective, we are looking at the people hoping to get into the workforce, people in the workforce, and those organizations that aim to position an individual for success in the workforce. This definition clarifies we are not only looking at the worker, but organizations that help prepare the worker. Workforce development from an individual's perspective looks into the how can I be employable and how do I obtain the skills needed for the workforce. An example of workforce development from an individual's perspective is companies like Westech. Westech aims to provide training for individuals to improve their chances of getting into the workforce and being successful within the workforce. Westech provides programs and trainings at cost-effective prices and also works with local high schools and community colleges in order to reach a wide audience. Their motto is to change people's lives, and they do this through individual development and making it possible for our workforce to have the skills needed to influence our local economy. Another example of workforce development from an individual's perspective is a nationally known Job Corps. One of the primary points of an individual's perspective of workforce development is employability. Job Corps does just that and aims to make trainings and development attractive to young people in order to make them interested in the workforce or prepare the worker. They also make the individual capable of utilizing quality skills learned throughout their program. Job Corps not only helps young people find a career, but also helps them to complete their high school diploma or GED. Their system includes 4 phases and definitely provides the guidance and structure to help an individual get into the workforce from all perspectives. Resources for an individual looking to get into the workforce are vast. They also depend on the amount of skills currently obtained by the potential worker. Those who have skills and are looking for employment can search in local ads, newspapers, phone books, and online for job openings. The best options for workers are career centers. For example, the Career Services Center provides services like the ones we previously mentioned and will help prepare the worker and make an effort to connect the worker to employment. Knowing and understanding the job force and the local environment is key for both the individual and those organizations hoping to help the individual. To learn more about the individual perspective, the best places to turn are the organizations that aim to improve the workforce by improving the individual. Training programs can be found everywhere, and the ultimate goal is to improve the workforce and give the people the skills and abilities to do so.
The next perspective of workforce development we'd like to examine is the employer's perspective. So when we talk about workforce development, what does that mean to employers? So from the employer's perspective, workforce development is described as training programs that provide existing and potential workers with the skills to complete tasks needed by employers to let the organization stay competitive in the global marketplace. Workforce development programs created from the employer's perspective generally have one goal in mind: to increase profitability through employee training. Employer-driven programs are generally designed and implemented as internal corporate programs and are meant to provide their employees and sometimes potential new hires with the skill sets to give them a competitive edge. More and more, these employer-sponsored programs are becoming more industry-specific, with multiple employers belonging to similar industries or employing similar occupations coming together to address skill shortages. So an example of a program developed from the employer perspective is Walgreens Retail Employees with Disabilities Program. In 2007, Walgreens implemented a training program targeted at employing people with disabilities. Recognizing the potential of this untapped labor pool, the company set a goal that 30% of their employees be people with disabilities. To achieve this goal, they established a partnership with a local disability agency and developed a curriculum to teach people with intellectual and developmental disabilities the skills they needed for jobs at their center. Walgreens soon exceeded its 30% disability hiring goal and found that the plant was operating 20% more efficiently than others. The business success of the Walgreens initiative prompted other companies, such as Lowe's, Procter & Gamble, Best Buy, and Toys R Us, to establish similar programs using this model. Another example of workforce development from an employer's perspective is McDonald's English Under the Arches program. Not uncommon in the fast food industry, McDonald's identified a problem of high employee turnover and realized a language barrier may be preventing some otherwise qualified staff from being promoted to supervisory levels. Driven by a corporate value to promote from within, they brought together a panel of adult English as a second language experts and partnered with the college to design and deliver a unique English for Work curriculum for aspiring managerial employees. The curriculum was built around specific workplace knowledge, terms, forms, and skills that were necessary to become a successful manager at McDonald's franchise. Staff at McDonald's headquarters were heavily involved in designing the program. Franchisees paid a tuition fee per student and also subsidized employees' time to participate. Since the program's inception in 2007, results have been very positive. 90% of participants have remained in their jobs after 3 years, reducing the high turnover rates common in the industry. And employees spoke of their growing confidence in English, not only on the job, but also with their families and in their communities. So how do we learn more about workforce development from the employer's perspective? There's plenty of research available today to learn more about employer-driven workforce development programs. One interesting source is produced by a group named Workforce Innovation Network, or WINS. WINS is a nonprofit organization focused on showing organizations how they can play a unique and important role in advancing the employer side of the nation's workforce equation. WINS has made available a series of how-to manuals on creating and sustaining employer-based workforce development intermediaries. These liaisons work with employers, workers, educators, trainers, and other stakeholders to cover topics such as career laddering, employment-related business services, and other employer-based resources. An example of workforce development resources that are available for employers include the Government of Alberta's Employer Series, shown here, which provides information on a variety of topics such as employee recruitment and retention strategies, dealing with workforce adjustment activities such as layoffs, as well as how to create a more diverse workforce. This collection of publications is available and can be ordered online free of charge for employers. Another interesting source of workforce development resources for employers comes from the Workforce Strategy Center, which is an entity that consults with education, workforce and economic development organizations, employers, and funders to develop strategies that help workers succeed and regional economies grow. One of their roles is to advise state and national leaders on developing effective education and employment policies to better align public resources with employer demand. Specifically, the Employer Interview Protocol is a conversation guide developed to help direct conversations between training provider and an employer around issues like goals, challenges, training, and skill gaps.
As we have been discussing, two ways to look at workforce development are from the individual's perspective and from the employer's perspective. A third possible way to consider workforce development is from the community's perspective. From this perspective, workforce development initiatives are driven by the economic development plans and concerns of the entire community, rather than strictly for the benefit of individuals or particular employers. From the community perspective, the purpose of workforce development initiatives is to educate and train individuals to meet the needs of current and future business and industry in order to maintain a sustainable, competitive economic environment for the whole community. In other words, the community perspective includes both the individual perspective and the employer perspective. It reflects the notion that cities and city leaders are increasingly realizing that a high-quality, skilled workforce is necessary to attract employers and to build sustainable economic competitiveness and success for the community. In the information age, more so than ever before, human capital drives economies. One way communities are operationalizing this community perspective is by convening partnerships and creating organizational structures that bring traditional individual-style workforce development entities, such as community colleges and other training programs, to the same table with employers and with economic development entities such as chambers of commerce. For example, in Garland, Texas, the Garland Chamber of Commerce opened an office on the campus of Richland College, the local community college. This allowed the two organizations to work side by side to set goals and to do daily problem solving. This partnership has spawned the Dallas County Manufacturers Association, which brings together local manufacturers, the college, the chamber, the local Workforce Solutions Board, the city, and the school district to work together to give their community the best possible chance to succeed in the global marketplace. Another example is the Clemson University Center for Workforce Development. This center was created to bolster South Carolina's manufacturing base. Duke Energy funded workforce development initiatives to help provide a next-generation workforce in key cluster areas. The move is intended to spur job growth by helping develop a labor force with skills in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and specifically in advanced manufacturing. Duke's energy funding, combined with funding from the U.S. Department of Labor, the Employment and Training Administration, and the National Science Foundation, allows Clemson Center to focus on expanding the talent pool to support workforce needs, consistent with Clemson's land-grant mission. The director of the Clemson University Center for Workforce Development stated, "Our goal is to develop more qualified employees to work in industries that drive the nation's economy. By fostering these partnerships, we can develop the workforce of the future." One helpful report to consider reading if you are interested in learning more about workforce development from the community perspective is The Emerging Policy Triangle: Economic Development, Workforce Development, and Education. This report, produced by the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, makes the case for increasing the stock of human capital as an economic development issue. It shares relevant statistics from all 50 states that show the connection between educational attainment and economic development. Another interesting document is a report from the Workforce Strategies Initiative at the Aspen Institute, titled Industry-Specific Approaches to Workforce Development, a Synthesis of Findings. This report gives examples of communities who are implementing projects in which they have tied together workforce development and economic development for the good of the whole community. Here are 3 additional resources that offer practical, up-to-date information about how to evolve workforce development efforts toward a more community-based perspective. The first is the Workforce Strategy Center website. The Mayors and Workforce Development briefing paper to be found on their publications page is particularly helpful. Next, the National League of Cities website. The Municipal Action Guide on Workforce Development for Economic Competitiveness they have developed offers good advice to municipal leaders about how to convene the appropriate stakeholders and take action regarding workforce development from a community perspective. Finally, the National Conference of State Legislatures website maintains a page devoted to workforce development resources, which includes a good overview of federal workforce development programs in the United States.
We would like to leave you with one final presentation put together by another group. This nicely ties together all 3 of our perspectives and helps to show how we can work together in the future. Enjoy!